All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a narrative of absolutely profound betrayal, brute survival, and a universe-shaking redemption. It is literally a masterclass in extreme long-term strategy. Honestly, it kind of forces you to ask, what would you do if you were pushed to the absolute brink of extinction? We're looking at the story of the billion-ship return of fallen humanity. And let me tell you, this isn't just your standard survival tale. It's a terrifying testament to the sheer resilience of a species that completely refused to be erased. So let's set the stage and look at how this whole crazy thing began.
It starts right here, with this incredibly stark hook. The galaxy cheered the day humanity died. I mean, just picture the sheer scale of this moment. You're in the very center of the imperial capital, beneath these colossal towers piercing the clouds, and billions of alien citizens are glued to the broadcast. They were all gathered to witness the execution of humanity's last leader, King Alexander. He was paraded out in chains before the Galactic Senate. And look, this wasn't just an execution. It was designed to be the ultimate humiliation, the absolute definitive end of the human chapter in the cosmos.
Now, you really have to notice the massive disconnect between the official narrative and reality here. The Galactic Senate listed all these absurd charges, right? Conspiracy, technological extremism, threatening the balance of power. But honestly, everyone in that room knew the real deal. Humanity wasn't a threat because they were evil. No, they were a threat because they were just too powerful. They were vastly too innovative and, frankly, terrifyingly united. The old empires looked at human potential and felt absolute existential fear. So they decided to destroy what they couldn't control.
But here's the thing. King Alexander didn't beg. As the execution platform started humming to life, he just raised his head and smiled. And this deeply, deeply confused the alien senators. Like, why on earth would a guy facing the end of his entire species smile? His voice echoed across thousands of worlds, telling the emperor that history has taught us one unyielding lesson. He looked right at them, eyes just burning with certainty, and delivered his final words. Humans always survive. Then, a blinding flash of white light from an energy beam consumed him, and the crowd just erupted into celebration.
Immediately following the execution, the Great Purge began. Earth was bombarded. Colonies were hunted down one by one. Every map got rewritten, and every single archive was systematically purged. And the timeline of this erasure? It is chilling. Within just 1 century, humanity was reduced to a myth. A millennium in? A legend. 5 millennia? They were just a fairy tale used to scare kids. And by the 10,000-year mark, humanity was entirely forgotten. An entire civilization just completely wiped from the cosmic memory. Fast forward to the next era, and the tone completely shifts. 10,000 years later, the galaxy wasn't cheering anymore. It was dying. And it was dying in absolute, terrifying silence. Entire star systems were simply vanishing overnight. Massive, heavily armed fleets disappeared without sending a single distress signal. Densely populated planets just went totally dark. There were no survivors to tell the tale, and no explanations. Just this escalating, suffocating dread spreading across the stars.
Eventually, the cause of all this silence was identified, and it was apocalyptic. Enter the Devourers. Now, these weren't some new, up-and-coming alien empire. They were a machine civilization older than recorded history. We are talking about ancient, autonomous war machines built during the very first age of the universe. Nobody had a clue who originally created them, and more importantly, nobody knew how to stop them. Every single civilization that had ever encountered the Devourers had fallen. They were basically an unstoppable force of cosmic nature.
To really understand why extinction felt inevitable, you have to consider what these things were capable of. We aren't talking about standard warfare here at all. The Devourers' fleets were so massive they literally stretched across light years of space. They packed weapons that could effortlessly shatter moons, and they had factories that would just swallow entire planets whole to build more machines. It was a self-replicating nightmare on a completely terrifying scale.
So operating out of pure desperation, the Galactic Alliance gathered everything they had left. Thousands of species pooled their resources to build millions of warships. It was, without a doubt, the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. They went out to meet the Devourers in open space to make their final stand, and the battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes, and the entire Alliance fleet simply ceased to exist. Utter hopelessness set in. Within 2 years, half the galaxy had fallen to the machines. Extinction was no longer just a possibility, it was a scheduled event.
But right at the edge of the abyss, this wild turning point emerged from the dust of history. Dr. Relkar, an alien archaeologist, was digging through ancient ruins on this completely forgotten moon. Deep beneath 10 kilometers of solid rock, he discovered a hidden data vault. And inside that vault, he found the impossible and, frankly, the ultimate irony. He found the first verified human records ever discovered. Now, most of the data was heavily corrupted from the passage of 10 millennia, obviously.
However, one single message remained perfectly intact. It was a set of coordinates pointing way out, far beyond known explored space. And those coordinates were labeled with a single ancient word, Earth. The Galactic Council had literally zero other options. Operating out of pure, unadulterated desperation, they assembled 20 ambassadors, crammed them onto a small diplomatic vessel, and sent them on a years-long journey into the absolute unknown, just praying they'd find a ghost.
But the reality of their arrival shattered every single expectation. I mean, they were expecting a dead rock, right? Maybe some ancient ruins of a mythical species they had betrayed all those years ago. But as they approached the coordinates, their sensors just stopped working. And not from a malfunction, but because reality itself was distorted. Space was folded strangely, and gravity was behaving impossibly. When the visual feeds finally cleared, what they saw was just awe-inspiring. Earth was no longer just a planet.
Earth had undergone these monumental, physics-defying modifications. For starters, the planet was physically larger than the laws of physics should naturally allow. It was surrounded by gigantic, world-moving engines. The surface wasn't made up of green and blue continents anymore. It was literally covered in continental-sized weapon platforms. Artificial rings encircled the globe, and entire fleets orbited it like this impenetrable suit of armor. For 10,000 years, humanity hadn't just been hiding in the dark. They had been busy forging their homeworld into the ultimate war machine.
Soon, an enormous vessel, easily exceeding the size of a moon, approached their tiny diplomatic ship. A transmission opened up, and for the first time in 10 millennia, an alien looked upon a human again. On the screen was Admiral Sarah Winters of the Terran Defense Authority. She wore this sharp silver uniform and carried a calm expression that just radiated a terrifying, unshakable confidence. The alien ambassador nervously stammered out, "We seek humanity." She simply nodded and replied, "You found us." The ambassador, absolutely terrified, blurted out that the galaxy was dying. Admiral Winters didn't even flinch. She simply said, "We know." The room on the diplomatic ship just fell dead silent. "You know?" the alien asked. And this brilliantly illustrates humanity's long game. Sarah smiled slightly and delivered this chilling line, "We've been watching." They knew everything. They knew about the Devourers. They knew about the slaughter. They had been watching from the dark, perfectly biding their time, just waiting and preparing for this exact epic.
The ambassador spent hours explaining the grim reality. They talked about the fallen worlds, the unstoppable machines, the impending extinction of literally all life. And when they finally finished their desperate plea, Sarah remained completely silent. Then, she asked one incredibly crucial question, and you really have to think about the psychology behind this. She didn't ask about the enemy's weapons. She didn't ask about tactics. She simply asked, how many are left? She wanted to know the survival status of the very civilizations that had voted to execute her species 10,000 years ago.
The ambassador hesitated, deeply ashamed, before revealing the bleak reality. Roughly 30% of known civilizations remained. 70% of the galaxy had already been wiped out. The sheer loss of life there is just staggering. But Admiral Winters' expression just hardened. "Then we still have time," she stated. The alien, totally confused by her confidence against an unstoppable threat, asked, "Time for what?" Sarah looked directly into the camera. "To save everyone."
What happened next wasn't a negotiation at all. It was a front-row seat to history. The ambassadors were escorted to an observation deck to witness the literal awakening of the Sol system. First, Earth's colossal engines activated, literally shifting continents and bending the space around the world. Then, alarms started echoing across the entire solar system as thousands of ancient, dormant shipyards powered up. And finally, massive spatial gates just tore open in the vacuum of space, and the ships began to emerge. And they poured out in a torrential flood. Thousands, millions, hundreds of millions. The alien ambassadors just stared in absolute disbelief as the fleet kept growing and growing. After 12 straight hours of continuous deployment, their sensors finally completed the calculation. 1 billion warships, 1 billion human vessels, and every single one of them vastly more advanced than anything currently existing in the known galaxy. One ambassador nearly fainted, just whispering, "Impossible." Sarah just smiled. "No," she corrected him, "human." Instantly, the billion-ship fleet jumped into hyperspace, diving headfirst into the war against extinction. At that exact same moment, across the dying galaxy, the sensors of terrified, hiding civilizations suddenly started lighting up. Impossible signals were appearing on their screens. Human signals, forgotten signals, ancient signals that hadn't been detected in 100 centuries. The entire galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the ghosts of the past violently re-entered the physical universe. And for the first time in 10,000 years, a broadcast echoed across every single surviving star system. The galaxy collectively held its breath as humanity finally spoke. "We are humanity," the message began. "We remember your betrayal. We remember your fear. We remember everything." It was the ultimate acknowledgement. They hadn't forgotten the execution of their king. They hadn't forgotten the purging of their worlds. The debt was absolutely remembered.
But then, the transmission shifted, delivering the ultimate resolution to this 10,000-year arc. But today, none of that matters, because humanity protects the future. Stand behind us and survive. And just like that, 1 billion human warships charged directly into the Devourer's swarms. They returned to be the exact shield the galaxy didn't even deserve. It really leaves us with one final, haunting question. What would you do if you had 10,000 years to prepare for the end of the world? I think humanity just answered that for us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.